section. And anytime we would have a request like, hey, I want a basin overview of what are the prices looking like in Eagleford or Permian, it would take like a week at least of going through each individual spreadsheet, compiling all that information, going out to EIA to pull like, crude prices, since the 80s or whatever. And now all that data is automatically pulled in. It's already, and it's there. Yeah. So it's saved me a lot of time. And I, too, am efficient / lazy. But yeah, PDFs are where data goes to die. Right. Is like basically the issue we have.
John, Annalea, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Oh yeah, this is exciting.
We've worked together for how long now?
Man, it's been 2017, so 6 years here.
It'll be 5 for me in October.
5 years and 6 years. That's crazy. It's gone by quick. For people that don't know, why don't you guys just give a little background? Start out on who you are.
Sure. I'm Annalea McMillan. Like I said, started in Ancova almost 5 years ago. Kind of have done just a little bit of everything on the midstream side. Did pipeline safety, title, right away, and then eventually GIS, and that's kind of became sort of my target career focus. And then I kind of got poached to come here to Ancova to help with like a midstream venture, and then kind of it evolved into data analytics and finding a way to really automate a lot of the tons of data that we get here at Ancova.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. John?
Yeah, so like I said, about 6 years now for me. Started off over at Chesapeake Midstream Access, then Williams, and in the scheduling department, and did that for many years. And then when Williams bought out the rest of Access and they wanted to move up to Tulsa, came over here, worked out really well to be able to stay in the city, and just been scheduling here since then, and kind of picking up odd jobs as we go. Started doing database design and marketing invoices and a little bit of everything else, and then more IT heavy stuff, and now it's just whatever comes my way I take care of. So
it's being in a small company, I think we kind of always have to evolve. I think you guys have done a really good job, the two of you specifically, at figuring out ways to take the existing career skills that you'd built, and it was like, how do I evolve these skills and use the past knowledge, but also do different things and figure out ways to innovate. And this episode's kind of a self-promotion episode a little bit. We don't do a ton of stuff about Ancova. Mark and I did one a little while back, but I felt like with the upcoming Energy Tech Night next week, OKC with the Digital Wildcatters, we're going to be presenting there, and we've done a lot of work with this new Ancova View product. And for people that maybe have a broader interest, I think this episode will talk into some of the nuts and bolts of how energy is monetized and how complicated that can be. Mm-hmm. And so if you're interested in learning about the process of how people get paid for their oil and gas and some of the complexities there, I think this episode would be interesting for you. And then obviously if you're in the business and you probably understand some of it, and maybe you'll gain some insight from the product that we've created, and maybe go check out the Energy Tech Night if you're here in Oklahoma City. But starting out, I think, John, it would be interesting to talk about some of the work that you started with on the contract side. Annalea mentioned a lot of data and getting our hands around it and having to deal with it. And so there's different aspects of Ancova View. You've got kind of the contract management side of it, and then you've got the production side of it. And they, now we've gotten them to talk together and really built it into one platform. But talk about just the contract aspect, what the contract management software does, high level. What are some of the challenges of dealing with that many documents and all the complexities of the terms and things like that?
Yeah, of course. So really how this kind of started off, right when I came on board, we were trying to implement a kind of a contract management system from a third party, and that really wasn't working out. Couldn't quite get it to do what we needed to do for our specific needs, and I had messed around a little bit with some access stuff and thought, well, maybe I can at least put something together that we can track things. And so started messing with that, and it really started working really well. We were able to take the contracts, and as most people in oil and gas, or probably deal with any contracts, know, trying to track contracts and amendments and changes and keep them all together and just what goes with what is a pretty difficult job. Most places have whole teams just to do that. And
right.
So started using the database to organize our thoughts with our contracts, so we could keep everything pertinent to one contract with that contract all tied together with an easy way to search it all up, and then kind of a centralized place to store those hard copies as well as those digital briefs that we were able to create. So that was kind of the beginning. That turned into, once I kind of figured out that I could do that, started using it more for my specific job to kind of make scheduling easier for me. We had to put together marketing invoices every month, Dory and I, for our trading, and getting those invoices together, tracking volumes and tracking prices. That was a lot of things that all had to tie together to get out pretty quickly after the end of the month for our customers to get paid. And so was able to put together, add on to that contracts database, a marketing database that could do all that work for us, using some of the other systems that I've worked with in the past as a template, and that kind of got the marketing side going, and just kind of evolved from there over the next couple of years, working on that.
Do you think, I was going to ask too, do you think some of the challenges around just how complicated these contracts can be, and for people that don't know, we're talking midstream agreements, but also marketing agreements, NASBs, amendments that go with it. We've got agency letters. We've got, all kinds of different, most of it falls in those buckets I just mentioned, but there are different random contracts that come into play. We're having to manage them not just for the clients, but for ourselves too. It's like if you've got hundreds or maybe thousands at this point contracts to manage, getting them in a way that's easy to see them in a summarized format, getting it to where they can streamline them to get entered into this database, and then having a user face that is accessible for people, that shows the pertinent information that they would want. We've had experience in the past at our other companies that we've worked for. Some of these contract management systems are cumbersome, they're expensive, they don't necessarily do as much as I think some of the things that you've built and some of the things we've done here. I don't think they do necessarily even as much as that, and they're very rigid. And so just talk a little bit about how we've put the interface together. There's obviously now a dashboard for it, and then I think we can parlay that into Annalea and some of the integrations you've done with GIS and these agreements too.
Yeah, so like you said, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to these contracts, and trying to track them all and keep them all together is cumbersome. And so building an interface to handle all of that, it's kind of a big ask. And these legacy systems that have been out there that some of the bigger companies use, like you mentioned, they are very rigid. They were built years ago. They've got layers upon layers of different screens and formats that they've put together, and it's cumbersome, and it's expensive to make those changes as things come along. So they worked great at the beginning. They still work great for specific tasks, but if you have something new come along, contracts are constantly evolving. I don't know if I've ever met a commercial rep that hasn't tried to make some crazy contract.
Sure.
And so when you have something like that come along, these legacy systems trying to fit those new contracts or the new models that people are coming up with into those systems can be very difficult and very expensive to go back to the developers and do. And we are using, relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but
Low code.
yeah, low code software solutions that can quickly
Adapt
and change
Yeah.
to those situations. And so it makes it less expensive. It makes it more nimble, so we can perform our jobs quicker. We can roll with the new changes, and it just makes it really nice to work with. So,
And then it was taking that product that we built for ourselves, seeing if clients found value in it. And I think there's been a lot of work done on the interface. You've got the stuff that's going on in the back end, but then we've also made a visual interface, a dashboard for clients to interact. And I think at first we weren't really giving access to that. It was just kind of an internal thing. And then as we demoed that for clients, I feel like they've found a lot of value there, especially, and we'll talk later about how the use cases have evolved for all this. But like, I think our thoughts were early that small companies, they don't have the budget to do a big software implementation. Their contracts may be disorganized. They would see a lot of value in this. And I think that has been validated with some of the clients that we brought into the program. But I also think big companies with a lot of complexity too.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been a little bit surprised with the reception from some bigger companies that are like, yeah, we have a hard time getting our hands around all these amendments and tracking all these things. And so John has done a good job on the front end user interface to make it, basically for a client to get in and navigate it, get them a login and be able to go through the terms, look at what's important. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, they can link back to the original document. So if you really want to go and just read it, you have the ability to do that. It's not just housed in some random Dropbox folder or folder on a server. It's all in one place. And then I think what Annalea has done has taken your GIS background and talk about some of the integrations that you've done there to make it tie in with that as well.
Yeah. I kind of got started because our controller was going on maternity leave, and I was kind of taking over some of her tasks, which involved taking tons of PDFs and scraping data out of them, and basically settlement statements, and putting them into Excel so we could actually get them paid correctly. And we were using like a little cheap third-party OCR software, and it was a lot of copy and paste, VLOOKUPs, all this other stuff, just like days and days of work. And I was like, this is dumb.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no reason for this to take so long. And I thought there had to be a better way. And then I had, experience doing a lot of heavy lifting with a ton of spatial data, using, scripts and ETL jobs and all that sorts of stuff. And I thought, well, I mean, it's data is data, should be able to apply it to this. And so I tried it and realized, holy cow, this is going to work. Then talked to John. I was like, he has a database for his contracts. Why don't we just add tables in for this production data?
Right.
And so that's kind of how it all started. So, we took at least a week, if not more, process and condensed it into hours, basically.
Right. Basically a way to scale it using tech.
Exactly. Yeah. And removing the human error element out of it as well.
Right. And we'll get to the production side. I think there's actually a lot of interesting questions on that front, but real quick on some of the GIS stuff that you did with the existing contract database, because I think that stuff's pretty nice. I mean, I think big companies probably have the ability to quickly, for example, map a dedication or do something like that. But the fact that you've streamlined that and put a GIS component to not just the contracts, but also the overall dashboard and program, I think it's huge. And I think that could actually end up evolving over time to looking really cool. I think it's been kind of a back burner thing. It's like, this is really, it's cool. It's a good function, but adding the visuals there, I think is really nice.
Yeah. Definitely having everything in a database, it means that we can quickly map things as well. So using the same type of integrations, we can here's just this big list of, section, township, range, and you can literally layer it over spatial data to create, here's your dedication. And then you can take a lat long for a well and plop it on an interactive web map, and you can easily navigate to a dedication, see where your wells are, see what pipes are around that area. And it's all done pretty instantaneously. And once it's there, you're not relying on really poor quality exhibit maps that are, in contracts that have been scanned over and over again. So I think it's a game changer.
Yeah, it's huge. So you were doing all these things. I'm glad that you started with how you started getting your hands dirty with some of the more business side versus, I think when you first came on, it was more mapping and truly what you used to do in your past roles. Mm-hmm. So you had the invoicing stuff. We also had you helping with some of this financial modeling, netback modeling, data, just analytics in general. And you've now been able to, process the data, like you mentioned, and do it in a quick way, but also add some analytics to that as well. Just talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been able to integrate into the platform.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I was saying was our commercial reps were getting kind of the same requests over and over again from our customers. I want to see a netback report. I want to see my shrink and yield. And that would take them hours to put together, maybe longer. And so now all that stuff is already there on the dashboard. We've also actually just this week, one of our customers is looking at a potential sale and wants to know what is my average residue price per midstream for all the years and all the months of data that you have. And that literally took me 1 minute to create that report for them.
Yeah.
So it's all about doing the really laborious work up front, which we've already condensed to be much quicker. And then that data is there and you can instantaneously get the answers that you need.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have a demo that we've recorded that shows some of the visuals. We'll also have a video. I'm cutting it into like a 45-second kind of teaser that'll be at the Energy Tech Night for those that go. But we'll probably post that as well. I've been behind on getting that out, and I think it'll help some people to see it. But talk, a little bit about just how the data is then displayed. And there's lots of different things that we can do. We don't have to cover everything, but some of the data that is displayed, and then how some of the different tabs or modules or whatever you want to call them, how they display it.
Yeah. So we probably the most important page that we have in the dashboard is your gas settlement information. Mostly because gas settlement statements are quite complex, much more complex than, say, a crude run ticket, which is another page that we have. But yeah, you can see all your delivered wellheads. You can see your BTU factors, your weighted average GPMs. You can see all your settled NGL and residue revenue, your average TNF, shrink and yield, your fuel rates, taxes, all your fee rates, and your total fee value as well. So it's and it's all aggregated, so you can filter by a particular production month. You could filter by a particular pipeline or drill down further to a single contract, a single CDP, a handful of wells, and it just, it's basically, it lets you see the forest through the trees.
Sure. Well, I mean, you mentioned about the complexity of these settlement statements. Again, for people that may not be looking at these, maybe you're somebody that is interested in oil and gas equities and investing in oil and gas, or maybe you're somebody that works in an oil and gas company that doesn't really get their hands dirty with this data. It's a lot of data. I mean, there's, I don't know how many variables that come out of one of those statements, 60, 50?
Yeah.
Something like that?
There's a ton.
Just the fields in that one table, there's probably there's 40 or some odd fields.
Yeah, so 40 different fields that come out of a single statement. And even if you have 20 statements, that's a lot, fields that you have to track. If you're a bigger company and you've got hundreds, or if you're a really big company and if you have thousands, these are not captured in traditional accounting systems. Is that correct?
I mean, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Chris could probably talk about it more.
Yeah.
He does a good job. He used to be a controller for this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But typically the accounting systems that house this data, it is so complex and it is so in such a poor quality when it's received that it has to be homogenized. It has to be aggregated and bucketed. And then what you have on the other end of it is data that is not very good for managerial type decisions, for analytics. Some people might be shocked, others might not, but going to even big companies, having them put together reports and things like that they need for their quarterly earnings call, you find out it's a bunch of people in Excel that are trying to manually hand key data from these PDFs into Excel. And then there's a lot of human error that's involved. And then ultimately the precision that you can get to by doing it that way is much lower, especially when you're getting to these bigger type of outfits that have hundreds or thousands of these statements with 40 plus fields of data on each one of them.
Yeah.
So it's huge to have that data housed, to be able to visualize it, to be able to filter it, sort it. You can still export it to Excel, reformat it. But talk about some of the data challenges that we have and how poor the quality of data can be,
Right.
and the formatting and things like that.
Well, there's, I think, about two major companies that are kind of that generate the settlement statements. So pretty much all the midstream companies use the same two companies, and basically the format. You might have to edit this out. I don't necessarily think those were built with data management in mind.
No, absolutely not.
At the very least, the piece of generating a PDF statement or even Excel statement did not consider, housing things in a database. Simply because the format, even within the same statement, same contract, from well to well, the format will change. And it's very frustrating. It makes it a lot harder to capture that data. So luckily, I've been able to pretty much automate that process. It takes a lot of upfront work. Part of the other issue too is, you might have the same kind of fee, like a charge per contract fee versus a service fee. They're the same fee, basically. So we standardize that piece. That way, like, just because DCP calls it this and, Mark West calls it this, we know that that's the same kind of fee.
Right.
And it's in the same spot in the database. Another issue is that there's a lot of missing information on a settlement statement. So a lot of those 40 fields aren't just for the things that are on the settlement statement. We have to do a lot of calculations. A lot of that is because typically on a settlement statement, midstreams really only care about BTUs.
Right.
That's what they sell.
Yeah.
So, but producers really care about MCFs. So there's a lot of volumes that are missing from the settlement statement, but the producer really needs that information. So we actually do those calculations in the background for them. Same with, fuel rates and all your TNF. I mean, we kind of look at the contract and we can back into a TNF for them because the TNF isn't actually on the statement.
Right,
You're just getting a net price.
Sure.
So, yeah, there's just a...
The rabbit hole is deep.
It is
on
deep.
settlement
Yeah.
statements.
And, one of the biggest hurdles when we set this up for people is that when you first look at a settlement statement, sometimes the math actually isn't right.
Yeah.
And so we have to approach the midstream and be like, hey, like, this math doesn't make sense.
Right.
This doesn't add up, which gets into the compliance piece of what
and
we do.
And then we'll talk about that. But staying on the settlement statements, there's also complexity around, you mentioned the formatting, you mentioned the nomenclature, whatever you want to call it, the way that things are labeled and how that's different. There's also complexity around contract terms that are complicated, tiered fees, pressure change and fees change. You've got different election statuses that you can have where you can reject or recover ethane. People have the ability to switch wells from high to low pressure or, vice versa, depending on the situation on that contract. And so month to month, you, and by you I mean the client or the producer, may have a commercial person that says we want to make this change, or hey, this was wrong. We get a reduction in fees, or we get a break because the contract says it. That data just flows through to these settlement statements. But then who is really checking that data?
Right.
If something changes, you're talking 40 fields across thousands of statements that are sometimes delivered in a paper format. We've seen people just get a thing in the mail. In fact, we used to get them. I don't think anyone's doing that really anymore. Now everything's mostly digitized, but just a couple years ago, we would get a big stack of like 100 or a couple hundred statements and just mailed to us. And it was like, why would they print these out?
That's crazy.
But even now, people are printing them out and then scanning them, and then sending us the printed, then scanned version that has really terrible data quality. The numbers are all messed up. I mean, so it's just, not only is it complicated, the data quality can be very poor. Some people will provide it in Excel, but even then, maybe speak about the stuff that can be missing. Like you mentioned, something might be wrong, but it's even beyond that. Like, what if the person's selling the residue on their own and there's no residue numbers included? Or what if they have a gas lift statement that's a totally separate statement that then applies to the processing statement? And it's like, so wait, I got a processing statement with part of the data, got a gas lift statement with other parts of the data, and yet they should just be on one page. But for some reason, you get two totally separate pages that have the same data for one well. I've kind of mentioned most of them, but I don't know if there's any other things like that.
Oh, definitely. The gas lift one's my favorite. So we actually, and we take care of that. So that's automated. We basically build a meter hierarchy in our system, and we know that gas lift statement goes with this processing statement. And basically we back out that volume and those revenue deducts. And then that way you can actually see truly, here's what that well netted. Here's what it made. Trying to think of others. On the residue side, if someone else is marketing the gas, and that's something that we do for some of our customers, there is no residue revenue on the statement. So we've built an integration with the marketing database that John manages, and literally pull out every single gas daily price, the volume that was sold that day, calculate what that price was, and then if there's a deduct, slowly come to, not slowly, but eventually get to our WASP price, and we merge that with the data. So now we have a residue revenue. If another third party is marketing the gas, we can still get to that value as long as we are provided that information.
Yeah, John, that'd be a good segue to you talking about some of the stuff that you do on the marketing module in that tab.
Yeah, so when we get in there, it's a lot of information that you're tracking throughout the month: what got delivered, what got produced, the imbalances, whether they're cash out, whether they're rolling, just trying to track where that money's going and how they're getting paid. The price, is it a first of the month price, or is it a gas daily price? We're having to also input all of the prices that we use into the system so that it can catch those, any deducts from those prices, and just keeping all that straight on a day-to-day basis is pretty cumbersome. And then you also run into one of the biggest disconnects that I found trying to integrate the two systems together is that on the physical contract, it may be one contract number. On the statement, it may be another contract number that has like a -1 or an A or a CA, but it is really part of the main contract. When we're marketing the gas, we may not market it under that contract number or sell it under that contract number. It might be a different contract number or something else. So trying to tie all of those things together and find a way that you have a commonality between them all can be pretty difficult. And so that's one of the things that we've had to work through and figure out how to do that, and just kind of to get it all to talk to each other. And going back to part of the contract side of it, you mentioned escalations and things like that in the prices or terms of the agreement, and most people don't know just offhand when a contract is going to escalate. That's you got a lot of contracts knowing which one escalates here. Your contract might escalate different fees at different times. And so it's very hard for people to track that month to month, looking at their statements saying, okay, well, the price is a little bit different, or it looks like, I got paid more or less, but why? And you don't know. They have to search through it and figure that out. And, that's a lot of work that most companies don't have time or money to, hire a full team of people to do. At best, you're getting a glance at a few contracts, every couple months or something.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot. I think the marketing side has really been helpful, not just for you guys to track it, but I think for our clients, there's a lot of questions around, how the gas was sold, why the weighted average sales price is what it is, especially when you get to multiple midstream companies, multiple downstream sales meters. It could be a single midstream, but you're selling at multiple points at the tailgate of the plant. And now you add in multiple midstreams. You've got different indexes that you have to track. You've got some people that have transport at the tailgate of those plants, and then you have to move it downstream. So there's invoices there. You've also got the complexities between selling it first of the month or selling it daily. And sometimes that price can be very close to each other. Other times that price can be wildly different. And so trying to figure out why the price was what it was at a small company can be hard, but if you're at a big company even too, it's just tracking that stuff. I mean, again, I talked to a public company the other day who is not a client, but they expressed interest, and they were like, yeah, whenever we get a request on why was our price this, we've got to go manually pull all these trades and build this spreadsheet, or, their investor relations person has to go try to figure it out and put together a slide basically in an investor deck saying this is how we sold the product to show how they got to that price. Whereas in Ancova View, it gives you a snapshot and you can immediately see it. And then not only can you see it, you can drill down into that data.
Yeah, that's what's great about this, the dashboard itself, is that, we have a whole page dedicated to specifically that. How did your deal get made and where was it sold? What midstream sold on what point? What index? Was it first month? Was it gas daily? And then once you have that data aggregated and, it's tied to everything else that we've got together, then you can go down to, like we mentioned before, all the way down to CDP or the specific well and say which well was most profitable, which well did this and did that, where was the gas, that was produced here, where did it go? And, you can look at that to do different analytics, decide, do I want to sell differently next month? Was that the best way to go or was it not? And so it gives you a lot of power to really, choose your own path in the marketing side of the business.
Absolutely. Beyond the settlement statement, we've then taken some aspects of the settlement statement and broken those down into some more detail. So there's the fees tab or module, and then there's the NGL page as well. Maybe talked about some of those, what they do.
On the NGLs page, we have a historical record of when was that production month in recovery or rejection for ethane. We also will basically visually break out, okay, how much of your NGL revenue was in rejection, how much of it was on recovery, how much of it was sold on Mont Belvieu versus Conway. On the fees page, we have all your different fee buckets, fee categories, and we have $1 per MCF and $1 per MMBTU. And then we also, some information that isn't on the settlement statement as well, is we take, your POP for NGL and residue, and we value it as if it were a fee. So you can see how much revenue you're losing because your contract has a specific percent of proceeds attached to it.
I mean, I think that is, again, it gets back to drilling down into the data and how long it would take you to normally do it, and then being able to do the filters. I mean, I don't think we've talked much about the filters, but the different layers that you can filter this at.
Yeah.
It's actually, the filtering is cool, but usually you get it filtered. You get it by well, so you can go pull a statement and look at it. But it's one thing to say, to add different categorization elements. You could say, if you've got a field and you're like, this is our north whatever field and our south field or our west field or whatever, or within a basin you have different play names or different zones, maybe different wells have different zones.
Yep.
And so if you provide us with those categorizations and those different categories, we can put those into a data field. And now you can pull every well from the west side of your play that's in this certain formation or zone, and you can see an NGL shrink or an NGL yield or the fees on those.
Yeah.
Or you can pull every well from a certain field, but you want to parse it out by each midstream company and then compare the two. Quickly do that. And then everything in there, not only does it have these filters, but you can also export everything to Excel.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And if there's anything that you want to export that isn't coming through the way you want it, we always have the data on the back end and can easily pull together a report for someone in whatever format they want.
Trying to think what else here on the NGL tab. Some of the features there, I really like the rejection and recovery breakouts and some of the historical trends there.
Yeah, and our kind of next phase, we're working on it. We're not there yet, but we're hoping to, because we handle elections for some of our customers. Some of them handle elections themselves, and there's been a lot of interest in showing, okay, we rejected in this month, but what if we had recovered? What would the net back have been? What was that difference? Did we make the right decision? So that's a feature that is coming in the near future.
Yeah. And I mean, like, just get back to the net back aspect of this, because, look, everybody, including, it's easy to do, right? I do it sometimes, right? You want to simplify a gas settlement statement, or you want to simplify an offer or an existing contract, and you say, well, which one has the higher fee? And you think about it, I think their fee's a little higher. Like, well, which one gets Mont Belvieu? Which one gets Conway? You start to kind of categorize different contracts with different midstreams based on the terms that are easy to remember. But ultimately, like, all this funnels through to a netback price.
Right.
And I think it's a complicated thing to model, but we have those models built, and the ability to have it all in one spot and then do these types of comparisons, or quickly look from one well to the next well, or from one contract to the next contract, and see it almost, I use the word real time. It's technically monthly as we get the data, but effectively real time in terms of when you get it. That's pretty powerful, in my opinion.
Yeah, if you want to see what was my net back for every single contract over the course of however many years that we have data for, we can provide that for you. We can, show, okay, well, when daily prices do this, here's how your net back changes, because maybe the price is worse, but your fee rates or your pops make up for that. I mean, it's a complicated number to get to.
Right.
It is a complicated number. And then if you look at it in, like you just mentioned, the near real time, how many times, I'm no executive, so I haven't been in some of these higher level meetings, but I've been in plenty of lower level meetings where you get specific questions asked in the meeting that you maybe weren't exactly prepared for. What was the net back on this well? What was the net back on this midstream? And with the dashboard, you can pull it up on your phone and immediately filter that information that's already in there and tell them right there on the spot, without having to go back and do the research and look it all up. Say, this was the net back, this well, this midstream, this pipeline,
I forgot to, so I'm glad you brought that up, that we do have it to where it can be pulled up on your phone.
Yep.
So you're in a meeting, you literally can load it up right there. You've got all that data at your fingertips on your iPhone or your Android. It's kind of crazy to me. And so we've talked about NGLs. Before we leave on NGLs, I think just a few more things. A really common requests are the shrinks and the yields, and understanding when you switch from recovery to rejection, how that impacts it, understanding different areas and how, from maybe one well has a different gas composition than another well, but they're on the same contract, or maybe there's two wells with similar gas compositions, but they're on different contracts. They probably have different numbers. And so as a reservoir engineer, we'd get, I'm not one, but as a reservoir engineer would come to us and ask us questions, whether it be now with our clients or in a past life at a big company. It's like, hey, I need the NGL shrink and yield for this area. And I'm like, well, there's 4 midstream companies in that area, so which one? It's like, well, I kind of need the blended for all of these. And like, that's a nightmare to calculate.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, and by the way, this one's in rejection, this one's in recovery. And they're like, well, why is one in rejection, one in recovery? And you're like, well, because they have different contract terms. And so the yields are going to look wildly different for the same well, same types of formation, same composition of gas in the same geographic area, with 2 completely different yields and shrinks for those wells. And if you ever want to see like a reservoir person or a finance person start to get frustrated, they're like, wait, why? Why can't this just be like one number? And so I think having all that data, being able to get to that one number really quickly is nice, but then being able to figure out why it is what it is, is I think the ability of what this does for you. Because we would go through these really complicated exercises where we're basically building all this in Excel. You've got like 50 tabs with all these different contract processing models in them. You're aggregating it into one. You're trying to do a weighted average, comparison. You're saying, well, this one's got 20% of the volume. This one's got 5%. You're trying to calculate this weighted average number. And then inevitably you give them that number and then they're like, well, why? And I'm like, well, and so then you're just trying to explain it to them.
Yeah.
And you're trying to show them this giant Excel model with 50 tabs and they're just glazing over and getting frustrated that why can't I get to this answer easy? So I think this gives people the ability to, with those filters and with those categories, they can see the rolled up number, but then they can also look at it however they want, by well, by play, by midstream, by rejection, recovery, and then start to see where are these variances coming from and why is it rolling up to look the way that it does. Crude, real fast, not as complicated, but still extremely valuable information. And just talk briefly about the crude settlement data and how that is displayed and what you guys are doing there.
It's very similar. Basically we take all the run tickets, we aggregate them by the production month, and if you've ever looked at those statements, you'll have a rejected truck fee, but it actually applies to the previous production month, but it's deducted from your check this month. So we kind of work through all that math, show here's your barrels, here's your rejected truck fees, here's your severance taxes, here's your net revenue. Again, here's your net back numbers. So it's very simple, similar, and luckily way more simple than the gas fees.
Yeah. It's more simple, but it is for some of our producers a very large chunk of their revenue. Yeah. So I think it's good to see. Quickly touch on what we've done with some of the NRIs, and we've had clients come to us and they want to see their nets. I think right now it's rolled up, but we do have the ability, if they provide it on a well-by-well basis, to show it that way if we wanted to.
Yeah, so as long as we're given that NRI number, we actually just apply it to that well in our meter table, and then the dashboard actually takes those NRI decimals and just takes the entire statement, both on crude, so we have an oil NRI as well as like a gas NRI, and just applies it to both settlement statements right there in the dashboard. Right. So you can actually get to that final number.
Yeah, and so not everybody has been as keyed in on that, but so we haven't integrated NRI, which is your net revenue interest for people that may not know, into every single tab. I think we could, if we wanted to, make that a toggle.
Yeah, we have it at like high level. Here's your gross revenues, here's your deducts, your fees, your taxes, and then here's your net revenue.
And so I think it's helpful for some people because they're like, I just want to see what my nets are. So that's another tab that we have, and this is probably one of the more powerful ones, but the contract compliance piece. Yeah. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's probably our most complicated piece of the whole enchilada. Basically, John and our contract admin people, they enter in the contractual terms. We actually, had to build that whole architecture out, figure out, okay, here's like all the different, fee variations, fee tiers. We enter all that information into the contract database. And then we load, we're loading the production data, the settlement statement data every month. And then we feed those gross wellhead volumes as well as the gas analysis from the statements into what is essentially a processing model. And it takes that gross volume and that gas analysis and looks at the contract database and actually calculates, here's what you should have been paid for this particular month. It applies the fuel rates, it applies, it takes into account what pressure base you're at for your shrink, calculates, were you in recovery or rejection? Here you get a Mont Belvieu price at this TNF. It figures out, your NGL revenue, your residue revenue, your fees, and says, here's what you should have been paid. And then we compare it to what you actually got paid.
Right. This is one that's huge. I mean, and this is where, John, your work on the contract database, and Annalea, your work on the production side and the data management and how it's all kind of tied together. And to me, it is the clearest ROI return on investment for people that use the product. It is very, very difficult to do this manually. It is not uncommon at all to find mistakes going both ways. We find mistakes where producers, our clients, are getting not paid enough or getting paid incorrectly, getting charged fees they're not supposed to, getting charged fuel they're not supposed to, fees that are escalated incorrectly. We find instances where the midstream is paying them too much. It's so much data, and there is a level of manual error at some point, whether it be the people putting it into these accounting systems, whether it be whatever it is. I mean, there's just so many points of failure. And so by setting it up initially, we can run it, we can check it. If we feel that it's correct, it goes on a fairly automated process moving forward, and it allows you to check for those mistakes. There are whole companies, and we do it ourselves, that audit these things. They're not cheap. It's hard to do. In the past, we have to do it manually. It can take you to do a 2-year audit to go through all this data. Like we mentioned, there's so many statements, so many variables. It could be a 6-month project for us in the past before we had this software. For others, there's companies that do it, and it's very complicated. And I think that when you find a payment error that's in your favor, that's immediate dollars. As long as it's about a 2-year period, you can go back and request that PPA, so a prior period adjustment. And I don't want to say every time we do this, we find something that creates value, but it's pretty close. Even small guys. I mean, we have groups that are very small outfits that don't have a ton of production, and we'll go and integrate this, and we'll find a $30,000 or $50,000 or $80,000 error. For bigger clients, back when we were doing this manually, we'd find a $300,000-$400,000 error. It's not. It's not malicious or intention for a midstream to be doing it incorrectly. It's just the rigidity around these accounting systems, not just for the producers' accounting systems, but for these midstream accounting systems as well. All it takes is one thing. I mean, because there's a lot of interpretation from the contracts to that system.
Right.
And so I think having that organization with the contract database, having experts that understand how to read those and then get them in, and then having it housed and having those two talk, that's what allows it to be automated, or fairly automated. I mean, when you see something's wrong, you kind of have to do some detective work and figure out what it is, or the client has to do some detective work. But giving us a way to do it in a streamlined fashion and found money for folks is huge. And back when we were at a big company, we had, I think, 2 or 3 people that this was their only job, and that's all they did. They were contract compliance analysts, and they were only able to they'd pick 3 or 4 contracts a month. They'd go in and they'd grab a handful of statements from the biggest wells, and they would manually try to check all this stuff, and they'd get through a couple, and they'd say, well, these 3 or 4 statements look correct. And that was a month's worth of work for them, just to go and dig up 10 contracts and have to go through and manually calculate all these things and do it. And that was just them doing a sample, let alone doing everything. So I am not aware. I hate to make the claim nobody else has that, that product. There very well may be some groups that have built it internally, but I've not seen it. And for the vast majority of people we talk to, they are not doing this today. They don't have a way to do it. They have a guy that maybe goes and spot checks them. And one of the groups that we're working with now that I hope we get as a client, the person that approached us was like, yeah, I used to have this guy that worked for me back in the day, and he was a wizard, and I could be like, hey, go check this stuff. And he goes, lo and behold, every time he would go dig into something, he'd find a huge mistake. He's like, he found multi-million-dollar mistakes.
It's crazy.
And he's like, and I'd have him do it every once in a while. He's like, well, that guy's retired. He's like, we don't have time with any of the team that we have now. He's like, it's killing me knowing that there's probably mistakes out there that we need to just go chase them down. So, sometimes making people's lives easier, like making their work process better or organizing their data for them or whatever, that stuff's all great. But at the end of the day, I think the tool has a real opportunity to actually create tangible dollars for companies. And so that's huge. I'm trying to think where to go from there with it. I mean, talk about some of the other use cases that we didn't really think about that some other clients have had. Maybe the integration on the back end with like the accounting systems and things like that we were not really anticipating, and it's made their life easier on that front.
Well, I will say just even internally, like because we were pulling in all this data, just even our pay sheet process of getting our customers paid every month got infinitely faster and easier. I think we get a lot of questions about helping with forecasting as well as like accruals, And it's just, a lot of it is just, I need this data and I don't have time to type this stuff in
Right.
manually.
Or even we got another customer recently that you handle mostly. I haven't done a whole lot with, but their biggest problem was trying to have an upload from all their statements into an accounting system that they already have. And they were spending a lot of time, a lot of man hours trying to take statements that they were getting from all these different pipelines and midstreams and take that data, aggregate it, then put it in a format where they could upload it into their accounting system in a timely manner. And we were able to take that for them and run it through the processes that we built and put it into, you know, the tables and the fields that we put together, and then quickly turn that around and give them exactly what they needed to upload. So they can send us statements. I mean, Annalea, the other day, I'm on the emails that come through, and the customer sent her a statement like 2 p.m, and at maybe 2:10, she sent him an upload that he could put right into his accounting system that was taking them days to put together before.
Right.
And, you know, he immediately sent back, wow, that was fast. And, you know, they just don't know how quickly it can be done and accurately. You're not getting those manual input mistakes that happen sometimes.
And what's funny about that one is I actually had to do some quick troubleshooting because we actually got an Excel file on that one, and there was one row that all the fields were off. They weren't in the right column, just one single row. And so I knew I wasn't getting the right number when I was creating the upload file. So I, you know, quickly looked through that file that we were given, and I was like, oh, and I just, you know, fixed it real quick and then immediately had it. So that's when you have an issue. It takes 10 minutes.
Right. That one was crazy. And as we've talked to other groups, I think that's a relatively common problem that we weren't even anticipating.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, like, wait, that's where the power of having all the data, having it organized, having it in a format that we can manipulate. Now the outputs can be manipulated. Mm-hmm. So if you need to see it in a certain format, maybe there's some work that first time to get us to format the way you want it. Maybe you got to hold our hand for an hour on a call or 30 minutes to say, or send us what you're currently doing. But once we figure that out, you get it set up that way, basically press a button, and now that data is in that format, and they can go use it for whether that be, maybe they've got an internal financial model, and they're like, hey, we run this big corporate financial model. We have to organize all this data. Maybe they've got an accounting system, whatever it is, spits it out that way. So that's huge. So we've gone over most of View, and maybe if you are listening to this, you don't have a big background in what we're talking about, gives you some appreciation of the complexity here. Or if you're at an oil and gas producer, an appreciation for maybe what the marketing and accounting people have to deal with, and, you know, a tool that can maybe make their life easier. Talk some now, John, about the pricing dashboard and some of the other things that we've done around some of the macro data and how that is it's housed. It's more of an internal tool. We're not always able to share all the pricing data, depending on if the client has subscriptions to some of the subscriptions we pay for. But if it is a client that's already subscribed or, you know, to some of these services, we have the ability to have that there as well. But talk about some of the stuff you've done there. Yeah.
So the pricing dashboard, this is one of those things, really like everything else we've talked about so far, where it came together because me personally, I'm kind of inherently lazy, and I'm looking for the fastest way that I can get something done, or to, you know, save some time for me. So
it's called efficient, not lazy.
Efficient. There you go.
Inherently efficient.
Inherently efficient.
You're definitely not lazy. I know that.
You know, and so I needed something so that I could pull prices quickly. That was part of the marketing integration, getting invoices out. It's something that's helpful to our commercial reps. It's something that's helpful to our trader. And being able to quickly grab those prices historically, you know, up-to-date prices, just everything that you need. Maybe you need to put together some kind of a model that's showing you trends over time with prices. And that can take a lot of time that you don't want to spend putting that together. And so just like the other things, we built some tables and started figuring out how can we upload these prices daily, you know, automatically, and then take that data and put it in a visual that makes sense for people to see. And so I really just wanted to put something together that my trader and I could look at and quickly find things, and it turned into being able to see Storage, gas and crude, trying to see NGL prices at all your different indexes. Same with gas, your daily prices, your first of the month prices. What are some of the other things that we have in there besides?
Opus, we have not all, but we have the gas and storage, gas storage and crude storage data from EIA. And I'll add a little bit there on the evolution of the pricing dashboard, because we were taking whatever format we could get our pricing information from, Platts or whoever, and we're started manually entering every single price every day or every month into a spreadsheet. And that was just on the gas side.
Yeah, because they charge you way more if they want it in Excel. Right?
Exactly.
Oh, you want it in Excel? That's going to be 5 times the price.
Exactly. And that was gas. We were doing the same thing for crude. We were doing the same thing for basis information, and the same thing for Opus prices. And so I just applied the same, philosophy to the pricing, and now we automatically scrape in those prices into our database, and we can automatically calculate basis information. And anytime we would have a request like, hey, I want a basin overview of what are the prices looking like in Eagle Ford or Permian, it would take like a week at least of going through each individual spreadsheet, compiling all that information, going out to EIA to pull crude prices, since the 80s or whatever. And now all that data is automatically pulled in. It's already, and it's there.
Yeah.
So it's saved me a lot of time, and I too am efficient / lazy. But yeah, PDFs are where data goes to die. Right. Is like basically the issue we have. And we also have a current customer who is getting charged thousands of dollars on top of what they're already paying just to get an Excel version of their own revenue statements. And so we're kind of working through that to help them just even save money there. Like, it's just crazy.
Mm-hmm. It is crazy. I love that PDFs or where data goes to die. That's probably going to be the intro clip to the episode. I try to bookmark something that I think would be good, and that is a really good one. It's probably one of the most common questions I even get from people is around pricing. Just like, hey, what happened last month, or what's going on with what was inside FERC, or what was, what was first of the month pricing, or where are we at, what's going on with basis or whatever. And so the pricing dashboard internally is very helpful for me to just have it saved on my, tab on my computer. I just pull it up. Sometimes we have it displayed here in the hallway on the main TV, which is nice. You walk in the office and you can see what's going on. If it's Thursday, I can see the storage numbers. It's just right there. It's not that hard to go find it, but the fact that it's all in one place and you don't have to go find it, it's just like removing that barrier to getting that access. Well, I think it's a fantastic product, and I'm glad that we're doing this episode. To me, what's been so refreshing is that the reception that we've had from the people that we've rolled it out to. We started guinea pigging with existing clients, giving them access to it, making sure that it worked, seeing what the feedback was on it, and then we now have standalone clients that strictly are using us for View. And it seems like every week there's a new person that's wanting to at least explore it, if not sign up. We just signed up another one this week, and to me that's a testament to the work that you guys have done, but it's also a testament to the team broadly, all the different disciplines that are involved, because it's not just an IT person or a data person that can go in and do it. Like, sure, the building of these things is not, like you said earlier, it's like a low code solutions, but that's not the secret sauce. The secret sauce, in my opinion, is the knowledge and the expertise in figuring out a way to use technology to amplify that and to create leverage for it. Yeah. And so the best feeling ever was hearing companies reaching out to me, seeing a post that we did on LinkedIn or whatever, and saying, hey, like, this would solve a lot of my problems. Some of those we we're in the process of trying to work out a deal with them, and I don't know if it'll go through or not, but whether it does or it doesn't, it's still a huge validator to be like, wow, like we were right. Like this is a huge problem. We knew it was because we dealt with it for some of us decades here. For me, over a decade. And so you guys have done a great job. I'm excited to showcase it. We need to get the word out more. This again is more of a self-promoting episode, which we haven't done a lot of, but hopefully this creates an evergreen place for people to go and to hear about it. And for those that are interested, and if they've made it this far, then hopefully if they've learned about it, you can reach out through our website or to me or to one of these guys if you have friends with them on LinkedIn and request more data, or they can go to Digital Wildcatters Energy Tech Night OKC and check out the presentation there and find out more info. But that's kind of all the main topics I wanted to cover. Anything else before we wind it down? You guys, any final thoughts?
I mean, I just want to say it's real gratifying to know that something that you put together to make your life easier is actually adds value to some other people. So that's been great. It's validation for what you're doing and spend all your time on. So that's been awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really speaks to the culture here because, you know, I've worked at, you know, larger companies and, you know, I get to, you know, come in and be like, you know what, I want to build this today. I'm going to solve this problem today. And I just am allowed to do it.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't happen in a lot of places.
Well, thank you. And hopefully that's, you know, something that we've tried to foster. I think it gets back to just like the survival mechanism of being a small company and being in an industry that's volatile and like figuring out a way to adapt. And you're right. At bigger companies, a lot of times it's just kind of like, this is the way we do it. Mm-hmm. I was very frustrated when I worked at a big company with why the accounting system couldn't give me the data that I wanted, or why when someone pulled up a lease operating statement, it showed this bogus gas price or NGL price. And then my, you know, asset manager would call me and he's like, why do we get paid $1 for gas? Gas was $4 that month. And I'm like, we didn't get paid $1, but the accounting system showing $1. Well, it turns out they're applying all these fees and it's like they've, you know, they had a PPA or like the data, or maybe sometimes it was like an accrual that was getting loaded into there. And I'm like, this is just no way to use this information to make business decisions based off of what I'm seeing from the system. So it is not an accounting system. People have asked me, oh, is this an accounting system? It's not. I think it can be integrated and work really nicely with accounting systems. But this is a level of granularity and detail on how the actual money is coming in and how people are getting paid and what the physical sales are for the product. And that is hard information to find for all the reasons we've talked about in this episode. And I think a lot of times in the production level, people are so focused on what is produced, but being in the commercial role my whole career and being in our side of it, it's really what was sold.
Yeah.
The production numbers are important. They need to track them. They've got a whole, I mean, that is an extremely important aspect of their business, but like it's also important what got sold, how it got sold, and how do we use that information to make the business better.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for doing this. I
thanks
know
for
like
having
this
us on.
first podcast appearance, but wasn't so bad, right?
No, we
not too
survived.
bad.
All right, we'll probably do some more content in the future. We always talk about doing it. Everybody's busy, so
Yeah,
I'm glad you guys took the time.
Thanks.
All right, thanks guys.